If you had Ruger and Magpul teaming up to make a Glock Gen 3 clone on your bingo card for 2024, you should probably play the lottery because you're really good at picking very specific things. Anyway, the Ruger RXM is here and it's made quite the splash. Now, Ruger's always made affordable, decently reliable handguns. They've always been pretty solid as semi-autos, but they've never been very fancy. I've often said they kind of have the motto, it's pretty good and pretty cheap, and that's often good enough. Now, I guess we could have seen the writing on the wall when they released the PC carbine with a Glock magwell that they weren't afraid to indulge in a little bit of Glockness here and there. With the RXM, they're diving full force into the Glock platform, specifically a Glock Gen 3 19. The RXM is a combination of Ruger and Magpul. You know, Ruger X Magpul. I guess X stands for crossover now. Ruger's making all the metal parts, it seems, with Magpul making the grip. As of this recording, it only comes in compact size, but if the box is any hint, it will be a full ecosystem with full-length grip and full-length slides. Magpul's already released now. Post-shot shows several different grip modules, but they're all the same, just different colors. I'm really surprised they didn't do a full size for like a Glock 19X style gun. But anyway, RXM's here. I've been shooting it for several months now. Well, not several months, I guess 2 months. And I've actually been fairly impressed by the little gun. So let's dive into it and talk about if Ruger out-Glocked Glock. If you went to SHOT Show this year, you could have thrown a rock and been asked to leave, but that rock would have hit a Gen 3 Glock clone. They are everywhere these days. It seemed to start with Polymer 80 releasing full frames, and then PSA made the biggest splash with the Dagger series, and ever since then it's just spiraled out of control. Heck, the RXM isn't the only modular Glock. Strike Industries is making their own Glock. Speaking of which, the big difference between the Ruger RXM and the Glock Gen 3 series is that it uses a removable fire control chassis. I think they call it the fire control insert. Essentially, it's the serialized portion of the firearm that can be removed from the grip module and swapped from grip module to grip module, and you can accommodate a variety of different sizes and even calibers without having to order a new gun. SIG wasn't the first, but they did make this kind of idea popular with the 320, but it originated in the 250 and has spread to the 365. And now this series of firearms has been around the longest. They do have a ton of aftermarket support, which could offer a glimpse into what we can get from the Ruger RXM. You know, in the future, we might see metal metal grip modules, but we also might see something crazy like a Flux Defense style chassis for the RXM, which would be pretty sweet, to be honest with you. Now, it's really easy to remove the fire control insert from the RXM, but I'm pretty sure YouTube would strike my video if I did. They seem to be really finicky about things like that. So we're not going to do it on screen, but it's really easy to do. The removable fire control insert is not the only kind of trick Ruger inserted into this Gen 3 Glock clone. The optics mounting system is also very, very nice. It's very similar to the Springfield Echelon in that it's a series of holes and threads and pegs that are removable and replaceable to allow you to fit a variety of optics without the use of like a plate system like the Glock MOS series. I much prefer this system than the Glock style. The Glock plates kind of suck, and in general, when you have a plate attached to a gun and then an optic attached to a plate, we're starting to stack tolerances, and that's never a good thing. And we want the optic as low and as close to the gun as we can, so I think these systems really make a lot of sense. They don't work the same way with most, well, I guess it's just the Acro series, really. The Acro, the Holosun 509T, those aren't going to fit on this gun without a plate, but there are enclosed emitter optics these days that will. I also want to mention K-cut optics, like Holosun K-cuts. While it's similar to the RMSC, it's not exact, and they don't fit flush on the gun. The pegs actually make it stand a little too tall, and the screws are a little too long. But as far as I know, Holosun and Ruger are working that out now. As mentioned, this is a Glock 19 size gun, which has always been their more popular 9mm handgun, so it makes sense to start with the compact series. The Ruger RXM's grip by Magpul is on brand for Magpul. It feels kind of like a K2 grip for the AR-15. It has that Magpul polymer feeling, which is kind of interesting to feel in a handgun. As you'd expect, it comes with two Magpul mags, which aren't bad magazines by any metric, but I would probably prefer the stock OEM metal line Glock mags. So while it's true the fire control insert and the optic system, kind of pushes it away from the Glock Gen 3 series, that's not the only thing. Ergonomically, it's a much different gun. ergonomically, Ruger and Magpul got away from that really thick, blocky grip design on the Gen 3 guns. Obviously, there's no finger grooves. Everyone hates finger grooves. Those are gone. And there's a few subtle differences I think worth mentioning. First, the grip's a little bit longer, just a hair. With the Glock 19 Gen 3, my finger would often sit on the magazine base plate and pin it in when I hit the magazine release button, which made reloads a little tricky. That's not a problem with the RXM. The RXM features this little integrated mag well that makes it easier to reload, and it allows you to goof up your reload without losing too much speed. Now I have big hands, big enough that they're scarred from slide bite from other guns, and the Gen 3 Glocks used to hit me with some slide bite, but the RXM does not because it has a, I guess what we call a beaver tail, but not really. It's just a little longer than the Gen 3 Glock series. Finally, one of the best changes was that the area around the magazine release is now scalloped, so it sticks out a little further than the Gen 3 Glock. The Gen 3 Glock magazine release almost sits flush with the frame, and it was always kind of annoying to me. That's not the case here. Hitting the magazine release is much easier, and reloads are much faster with the gun compared to the Gen 3. There's also this little notch built into the frame where your thumb sits. It's almost gas pedal-like, but not to that extreme. It's kind of nice. Your thumb sits on it. You can apply a little bit of pressure to help control recoil. One of the ergonomic restrictions you're going to run into with the RXM is the fact that the Gen 3 Glocks were never ambidextrous. The controls are all set up for a right-hander, and you can't switch the magazine release or the slide lock to the left-hand side. Ultimately, the RXM feels like a Glock Gen 3 with 20 years of gun making experience behind it. Well, and that's exactly what it is. All right, let's talk sights and accuracy. So we are not stuck with crappy plastic sights with the RXM. We actually get metal sights. The front sight's a night sight, and the rear sight is a blacked out all metal sight. But I never actually used the sights because I threw on a Defender ST from Vortex, and it's proven to be actually an excellent red dot for this handgun. So it's been my go-to for the RXM. Now in testing accuracy, I shot the Chuck Pressburg's no-fail pistol drill, which is a simple drill, but it's also very demanding. You have a B8 as your target, and you stand at 25 yards with the pistol holstered. You draw, and you fire one round into the B8 within 3.5 seconds. And you have to do this 10 times. Anytime you exceed the 3.5 second time, you fail. Anytime your round hits outside the 9 ring of the B8, you fail. So with that in mind, the first few times I shot the drill, I did fail. I was really stressed on time and not taking my time. Once I actually stopped caring so much about the timer and just shooting, I was able to pass the drill pretty successfully. I can almost do it on demand now, but I do have some work to do on my own accuracy. After shooting at 25 yards, I went to 50 yards and I shot on an IPSC-sized steel target, and I landed every shot I had. And that's not that impressive. Any skilled shooter can do that, but I don't really consider myself that skilled of a shooter. I'm no expert. At best, I'm a qualified enthusiast. So if I can hit a target at 50 yards 5 times without, supports or without a rest, I consider that gun pretty accurate. If you can hit targets at 25 yards and 50 yards, if we get closer than that, predictably it's a very accurate gun. The trigger, which I don't really think has that big of an effect on accuracy, is nice. It's very smooth, and while it's not lighter or necessarily shorter than your standard Glock trigger, it does feel smoother. There's less grit to it. You can swap the trigger with most Glock triggers. The one thing you can't do is swap it with a trigger that converts a Glock from a partially cocked striker-fired gun to a fully cocked gun. I think the Timney Alpha does that, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Any kind of outside the norm trigger, it's probably not going to work with the RXM. That being said, I found the gun to be as accurate as any Glock, or even more accurate than other guns in this size range. I wouldn't have any problems trusting it for self-defense or concealed carry. Now, if you've ever shot a polymer frame compact pistol, you know what to expect from the RXM in terms of recoil. There isn't a whole lot. There isn't a whole lot of muzzle rise. It handles very well. That little gas pedal notch thing, whatever it is, does seem to help. I kind of forget to use it, kind of forget to put my thumb pressure there because I've never used one before, but when I do intentionally, it does seem to have less muzzle rise. And unless that's a placebo effect, I'm all about it. Now, the main drill I usually use to test my ability to control a gun is the bill drill, which is to draw and fire 6 rounds inside of an IPSC-sized A zone as fast as you can at 7 yards. I've never scored below 2 seconds, but that is my goal, my fastest being 2.08 seconds. So with this gun in a Safariland holster, I used the ALS retention device, and I was able to shoot it at about 2.5 seconds was my best. It was actually 2.54, and my worst was 2.7 when I tried it cold. So that's not too bad, especially for me. For a more experienced shooter, they're going to be able to drive this gun a lot faster. But for someone of my skill level, and I think of most average skill levels, the RXM is not going to be difficult to control.
Does the RXM live up to the Glock levels of reliability that made the pistol so famous? Well, it's kind of tough to say right now. I can speak for my sample size of 1, but as a new pistol, we really don't know just yet. I will say my RXM has worked quite well, but it does seem like this series has a little bit of a hang-up. When I was doing some reloading drills with a mixture of different Glock mags, I just had a handful of them. And one occasion, the Glock OEM mag seemed to cause the slide to lock open while there was still ammunition in the magazine. When this occurred, I kind of made a quick note in my phone just to remember to check on that. And it didn't happen again. I did several more reload drills. So I looked at it, and it seemed like across the internet, this was a problem other people were having. Now, as someone curious about things but not smart enough to figure them out for myself, I went and looked around the internet, and I was able to find a video from a channel called 8skep1, who I'm going to link his video. And he goes into like 18 minutes of detail of why this is happening. It's actually pretty interesting. So if you kind of want to know why this happens, check his video out, subscribe to his channel. He actually seems to make really good content. And with that said, it doesn't seem like he's a gun channel. He just did some videos on the RXM that are pretty interesting. Now, outside of that one issue with the Glock OEM magazine, the gun has been trouble-free for 600 rounds or so. I've shot primarily Monarch steel-cased ammunition, which has a zinc coating. It's the cheapest ammo you can find, or at least I can find locally, and it seems to work all right. There were no issues with the ammunition in the RXM. I also fired a handful of 115 grain Winchester Ranger rounds, I think. They're JHP, the black ones kind of look like black Talons, but we don't have those anymore. Overall, I will call the RXM reliable as long as you're using the magazines that come with it. I also tried ETS mags, no problem. KCI mags didn't give a problem, and mostly OEM mags didn't give me a problem. I just had that one time where the slide locked open with the ammunition still in the magazine. It's interesting, and I'm curious to see how other people are dealing with it or how common it is, but that remains to be seen at the moment.
So price-wise, what are we doing? Is Ruger still living up to the pretty good, pretty cheap? Actually, I think they've escalated. I think they're damn good and still pretty cheap. It seems like you can get the RXM for under 400 bucks right now if you shop around. It's pretty close to 400 bucks, but under if you look. And if you have like a membership card or free shipping, you're going to get the gun for under 400. Now, with that in mind, this gun is brand new, and it seems like the demand for it's pretty good. So it's bound to drop in price, especially as we enter a Trump presidency when no one's going to be able to sell guns. So if you really want this gun, Ruger will probably hate to hear this, but wait like 2 more months and see what happens. One of the biggest value points to me is the fact that it does use Glock mags, because Glock mags are everywhere and they're very cheap. I can get some really cheap KCI magazines and just tear it down without spending much money. Now, what's not going to be cheap is when I keep buying grip modules, it changes the color because I really want the OD green one. And once they start making new slides and new grip modules, I'm probably going to change this gun around to make it like a Barbie doll of my handguns. Compatibility with Glock 19 gear is actually really good. I only have a few holsters for my Glock 19, and this one fits all of them, including the Safariland level 3 holsters. I actually have the new Glock 19 ballast holster, which I don't think comes out until March from Safariland, and that's what I've been shooting this thing through most of the time. Other Glock parts like barrels, magazine releases, and most of the internals can be swapped like a normal Glock. Doesn't seem to be, I haven't run into any or seen any issues with a lot of parts outside of the triggers I mentioned. So with that in mind, do I think the RXM is better than Glock? It's definitely better than the Gen 3 Glock. The Gen 5 does introduce some more ambidextrous features, a better grip overall, and does have an optic mounting system. So yeah, the RXM is better than the Glock Gen 3, but if it's better than the Gen 5, that's going to be an argument I'm not willing to make, not yet. Overall, I was both surprised and impressed by Ruger and Magpul making this pistol. I didn't see it coming, but it was a real pleasant surprise in 2024 on. With all that in mind, what do you think of the Ruger X Magpul pistol? Is it for you? Is it worth the investment? Or is it just kind of a Gen 3 Glock with a few fancy tricks? Let me know below. And I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, all that. It's pretty fun. And I'm really enjoying doing this. So, and you guys make it possible.